This is Julian Lewis, and along with being a 5-star recruit, this kid is a top 10 player in the class of 2025. And as he was solidifying himself as the number 3 quarterback in the nation, it was no surprise that he was receiving a ton of offers going into college. But after he met up with NFL legend and current Colorado head coach Deion Sanders, he knows that he might have a chance to become the next great Colorado quarterback like Shedeur Sanders. So ultimately he chose to put an end to his recruitment, because for his college decision, he decided to sign with Colorado. And it becomes clear from day one that he has got some pretty big shoes to fill.
Oh my gosh, you got big shoes to fill, my guy. So how you feeling though? You ready to go?
I don't have a choice, bro.
Hey.
So today we will be putting Julian Lewis into college football 25. Let's see how his career might turn out at Colorado as we follow him on his road to glory. Now, coming out of high school, Julian Lewis is mostly a pocket passing quarterback. So we actually decided to get to Colorado early so we could start getting some work in with these receivers. He was really impressing the coaches early on, kind of like how Shedeur Sanders was impressing the coaches at the Cleveland Browns minicamp. But going into the spring, Julian Lewis was really proving that he was getting comfortable with this offense. And he felt really good about becoming the starter going into his freshman season. But there was also another quarterback who had just come to the roster, as Caden Salter, a senior quarterback out of Liberty, had just transferred in, and ultimately Deion Sanders had made the decision to make Caden Salter the starter. Now, Julian actually did come into the game a couple times throughout the season due to injury, but ultimately for his freshman season, QB1 in Colorado would remain Caden Salter, and Colorado fans just had to wait for their freshman quarterback to one day get his chance. So now, after back-to-back 9-3 seasons from Colorado, it was now more clear than ever that this program was heading in the right direction, which ultimately brings us to Julian Lewis' sophomore season, where it looks like Coach Prime had definitely done some recruiting as he has multiple skill position players at 99 speed. And that's definitely something Julian is looking forward to playing with over the next couple of years. But for now, he has to deal with an offensive line that is definitely subpar.
The O-line is realistic. Yes, very realistic. What you mean? Niggas can't block for nothing.
And is probably one of the main issues with this team as they're now heading into the season. But looking at the schedule, man, one thing that people noticed was how bad the opposing teams were. I mean, it looked like they were only going to play one top 25 ranked team throughout the year. And Deion Sanders was getting lit up on social media going into the regular season. People were definitely not a fan of Colorado anyway, but especially after they lost Travis and Shedeur. But either way, a new era of Colorado football was about to begin. And led by Julian Lewis, they were heading into their first game of the year against Georgia Tech. Now, in his first game as a starter, Julian Lewis is out there making some nice throws despite being pressured. He did a good job on his opening possession as he continuously kept the chains moving for his team. And although the drive would eventually end in only 3 points, a turnover from Georgia Tech resulted in Colorado getting great field position, which is where Julian Lewis started to realize that his offensive line had some issues. And those issues seemed to continue into the third quarter as he got sacked again, bringing Colorado to a 3rd down and 21, where it seemed like if they didn't get it, they could fall behind even further. But Julian Lewis came up with a completion, coming up with a big play on a drive that ultimately led his team to the red zone, where unfortunately they would get stopped again, but at least now they were only down by 1 point, because they would get the ball back in the fourth quarter with a chance to now take the lead. And Julian Lewis was doing a great job putting them in position to do exactly that, especially on a play where he slinged it out to a screen to the left side, and the receiver is able to make his way upfield for a touchdown, crossing over the goal line for Julian Lewis's first touchdown of his college football career. And this was a big moment in the stadium as everybody thought this was a game winner. But Georgia Tech would take the lead right back, going back up by 1 point in a game that had around 30 seconds left. But that didn't really seem to matter to Julian, as on this play he comes up with a dime, getting his team past the 50 with less than 30 seconds left. Now a couple plays later he comes up with another completion, putting Colorado deeper into field goal range and allowing them to bring out their field goal unit. And from there, Julian Lewis helped the Buffaloes come up with their first win of the season, as Colorado comes up with a 15-13 victory. And although the game was led by Julian Lewis, Drelin Miller, a wide receiver, would go on to win Player of the Game, as he showed out with 9 receptions and over 100 yards. But Julian Lewis would also have a day himself, going for 230 yards in his first game as a starter. And at this point, he feels pretty comfortable going into the rest of his schedule. And especially since the next few weeks look like they might be tune-up games, Julian Lewis is going to take every opportunity he can to grow and get better, especially as he's heading into his next matchup at home against UConn. Early on, it was pretty clear to Julian that this was a worse team than he had played the previous week. It seemed like everybody was playing better against these guys, and that was especially including Julian. As on this play, he scrambles out to his right side and throws a laser towards the end zone that gets caught for a touchdown. And from there, it seemed like it was only just the beginning, as throughout this game, Julian Lewis was absolutely dotting up this defense. He came out here in the second quarter and identified a bust in coverage immediately, throwing a pass deep over the top to a receiver that ends up getting caught. easily going across the goal line for another touchdown, and this score got the whole crowd putting their wrist up. By the fourth quarter, Colorado was up 17-0 before Julian Lewis throws another dime towards the end zone, coming up with his third score of the day. And just like that, he had led Colorado to another victory, closing this one out 24-0. And in this one, he goes on to win his first player of the game, putting up almost 300 yards passing with 3 touchdowns, but Julian knew that this was nothing compared to what he was potentially capable of. So he kept working hard at practice because he knew no matter what, there was still a lot more work to do. But now heading into another home game on the season, this team was completely locked in. They had a chance to go 3-0 for the first time in a few years, and the only thing that was standing in their way from doing it was a matchup against Wyoming. As soon as Colorado touched the ball in this one, it was obvious that they were firing on all cylinders, as Julian Lewis throws a pass right over the top of the defender that goes for a touchdown, putting up points on one of the first plays of their opening possession. And now they had some momentum that they felt like would carry over into the second quarter, because on this play, Julian just barely gets the ball out to the receiver on a screen pass, and somehow this dude is able to finagle his way past the entire defense, and out of nowhere, he's going for his second touchdown of the game. This team was looking like they were miles above Wyoming, and it didn't change much going into the second half as they continued to dot up this defense. And eventually, Julian led them down to the goal line where he came up with his first rushing touchdown of his career, putting up points that gave his team a 3-possession lead, but they were not done yet. Because by the fourth quarter, now up 18, Julian feels like he wants to take another shot downfield, and Omarion Miller would come up with another touchdown, calling in his third one of the day. And just like that, Colorado goes on to win their third game of the year, closing this one out 28-3 in another blowout victory. And as Julian Lewis goes on to win another player of the game for his 4 touchdowns, there are a lot of Colorado fans who were extremely excited about the future of this program. They had a young quarterback who was developing quickly and was doing a pretty good job filling in for some pretty big shoes. But they were looking forward to keeping this momentum rolling as they were heading into yet another home game, this time against Iowa State. And now that Colorado's back to playing Big 12 teams, their offensive line is back to being exposed. Most of the time, they couldn't block for nothing unless there was a 4-man rush. But they're lucky that's what they faced on this play as Julian throws a bomb downfield, and this one ends up caught by a receiver. And out of nowhere, with this opening drive looking like it was about to go 3 and out, all of a sudden Julian Lewis is out there making plays to help lead his team down to the goal line, where this play action pass leads to a touchdown at the end of the first quarter, and it seems like that's all the momentum that Colorado needed going forward. Because even though there were plays where Julian Lewis was getting clobbered in the backfield like Ben Grimm wants to do to Sue Storm, all that really did was just force Julian to start using his legs more to extend plays, and he continued to come up with big throws, bringing his team back down towards the goal line. On first down, a toss out to the right side would end up leading to a score, putting his team up now by 3 possessions, and ultimately this was enough to put this game away, as Colorado comes up with a 20-10 victory, officially putting them at 4-0 on the season. But as good of a job Julian was doing replacing Shedeur Sanders, he had some receivers out there who were also doing a great job replacing Travis Hunter. But despite how well a lot of these guys were playing throughout the season so far, Julian could not help but give the credit to Coach Prime, as he did a great job building this program into seemingly a pretty competent team. But now it seems like they're actually about to get their first real test, because for the first time all season, they will now be heading on the road, where they will be facing off against another Big 12 opponent, West Virginia. Now on their opening drive, this Colorado offense ended up going 3 and out, struggling early against a team that seemed to struggle right back, as West Virginia turned the ball over and gave Colorado great field position, bringing us to 2nd and 4 where Julian Lewis came up with an easy touchdown, tying this game up at 7. And from there, it seemed like the Buffaloes were going to be completely locked in going forward. Unfortunately, it turns out that the offensive line did not get the memo, as they ended up allowing a sack and were just not playing well all throughout the first half. And as West Virginia went on to take the lead, things were not looking good for Colorado, especially after Julian Lewis comes out here and throws his first pick of his college football career. Now, luckily, though, it did not turn out to be too big of a deal as West Virginia did not capitalize. And on the following drive, Julian Lewis was doing a great job leading his team back downfield, coming up with a couple completions that led his team right towards the goal line. And from there, he was able to make a throw that went for a touchdown, tying this game back up at 14. But even after West Virginia took the lead back, they were still in solid position, because even though Julian took another sack, they still had a chance to make a field goal and send this game to overtime. But unfortunately, they don't, as Colorado would go on to miss the field goal, resulting in them losing their first game of the season, dropping this one 17-14, and this was easily the worst game of Julian Lewis's career. But considering it's only the first loss of the year and they had a long season ahead of him, Julian was not at all discouraged, man. He kept working hard, and he was already looking forward to getting into his next game, as Colorado was now heading on the road to face off against another Big 12 opponent, the TCU Horned Frogs. Now to start this game off, it seemed like it was going to be more from the previous week, as Julian Lewis was out there getting sacked early on. And when he wasn't getting sacked, he was still getting pummeled in the backfield, as his team went 3 and out on their opening possession. Eventually things would change though as Julian Lewis started to lock in and get back to how he was playing throughout the first 4 weeks of the season, as he rolled out left on his play and came up with a big completion downfield. He was doing a great job evading pressure and coming up with some big plays on this drive, especially on this play where he stayed strong in the pocket, delivered a throw while taking a hit, and still came up with a touchdown, coming up with a score that now made this only a 1-possession game. But Colorado would still have the chance to take the lead after getting the ball back only down by 3. And once again facing pressure, Julian is able to get the pass out to a receiver, and this kid is able to work his way past the entire defense, sprinting downfield for a touchdown that gives Colorado the lead and a ton of momentum going forward in this game. Well, at least that was until the second half, where Julian ended up throwing his second pick of the season. But TCU was not able to take the lead. In the following drive, Colorado was able to get downfield, and they easily scored a touchdown on this wildcat read option. Unfortunately, though, TCU would find a way to tie this game up, bringing us to a play where Julian Lewis decided to take a shot deep downfield. And even though it was great defense, somehow this pass was caught. Draylon Miller comes up with an incredible catch off the tip pass. But as cool as this play was, this game would ultimately go into overtime. We're down at the goal line. Julian dropped back and threw a dime on this slant route, giving Colorado the touchdown lead in overtime. And ultimately, it would turn out that this score was enough to put this game away, as Colorado comes up with a big overtime win, 28-21. And they were led by their young quarterback, Julian Lewis, who threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. And at this point in the season, he had Colorado sitting at 3rd place in the Big 12. And he knew that if his team wanted any chance of winning the conference championship, they would have to try and start another win streak in order to get back on track. But that starts with their next opponent, as they were now heading back on the road to face off against Utah. And in the first quarter of this one, neither offense was really playing too well. But as soon as the second quarter started, Julian identified a mismatch on the left side and dimed him up downfield. This receiver took this one all the way to the end zone for a touchdown, and Colorado was letting the entire stadium know that they coming. Cordell Russell had become a standout receiver for this team throughout the entire season, and this game was no different, as he came up with another catch, bringing his team to the end zone for another score to make it his second one of the game. Craziest part about it is that he was not done yet, as it turns out that the guy who he was playing on defense was just a complete mismatch for him, and he was continuously beating his man downfield all throughout the entire day, coming up with another score that pushes Colorado's lead to 24. And with Julian Lewis having complete trust in his #1 receiver, it was no surprise that he continued to take shots downfield to him, and it did not disappoint, as Cordell Russell was making his way towards the end zone for the 4th time in this game, solidifying his performance as one of the greatest in Colorado history, and doing enough to put this one away, as Colorado goes on to destroy Utah 31-7. And the player of the game goes to Cordell Russell with over 250 yards and 4 touchdowns. An absolute monster of a game that couldn't have been done without his quarterback, who threw for over 300 yards on the day. Julian Lewis was improving more and more throughout the season, and that continued to show going into a game against Kansas State, where on this play he rolls out right and finds a man on the right side of the field who powered his way across the goal line for a touchdown, putting up a score that gave his team momentum and continued throughout the first quarter. Because on the following drive, he found a receiver who was able to escape past this defense and come up with a big catch downfield that went for another score, putting Colorado completely in the driver's seat throughout this game, as they got the ball back once again, still up by 14. And they did take advantage of the opportunity, as Julian Lewis threw another touchdown, putting his team up by 3 possessions and already doing enough to put this game away. And another win on the season makes this one 3 straight for Colorado. These guys had started to get on a roll, and many fans began to notice as they were praising the fact that they were now 7-1 on the season, and potentially had a chance to make their first college football playoffs. And at this point, it seems like there was absolutely nothing that was going to stop them as they headed back home to face off against Arizona State. And locked in, they definitely were, as Julian Lewis comes out here and throws a strike over the middle of the field that went for a touchdown, putting them up by 7 early on, and that pretty much gave them all the control they needed going forward, as by the end of the fourth quarter, they were now up by 2 possessions, and just for fun, Julian decided to throw his second touchdown of the day, putting his team up by 3 possessions and putting an end to this game, as Colorado closes this one out 24-7. But now in a season where it seems like they played a bunch of pretty weak teams, they are getting prepared to face off against their toughest test yet, as now being the 10th ranked team in the country, Colorado will be back at home to face off against the 11th ranked Arizona. Early on in this one, it was more of the same that we had seen throughout the previous weeks, as Julian Lewis identifies a mismatch and launches it deep downfield, coming up with a big completion where the receiver is able to make his way towards the end zone for a score, putting up some points that seemed to have given Colorado a ton of momentum going forward. And then out of nowhere, all the momentum seemed to be gone, as Julian Lewis was just repeatedly being hit in the backfield, and soon Arizona was up by multiple possessions. And it didn't really help team morale when at the end of the first half, He tried to go for a Hail Mary that ends up getting picked off. It would not be till the end of the third quarter where Colorado would get down to the goal line, and even then they could not come up with a touchdown. That would have to wait until the end of the fourth quarter where they were down by 17, but even though Julian had come up with a nice score in the final moments of this game, Arizona had already given the Buffaloes their second loss of the year, closing this one out 27-17, and this was another game where Julian did not play at his best, but he was having a tough day being pressured a lot. Now, Colorado would drop to the 17th ranked team in the country. And of course, there would be people wasting no time to talk crazy about Colorado and Deion Sanders. Regardless, though, all they seem to do is just motivate Julian to lock back in, because they do not have too tough of a schedule remaining. And they had a chance to get back in the race for the Big 12, starting right here against Houston. Now, this was a game where Colorado had dominated all throughout, especially here in the second quarter where Julian came up with his second touchdown of the day. And believe it or not, he had already done enough to close this one out as Colorado comes up with a 21-0 victory. And Julian Lewis was back to playing at a high level as he scored 3 touchdowns in this one, but he stayed on fire going into a game against BYU, where it turns out that Julian realized that he should start using his legs a lot more to avoid the pass rush, and on this play it actually resulted in another rushing touchdown for him on the season, as he puts up a score against the weak BYU team that Colorado had control over all game. Because later on down at the goal line, Julian was actually able to come up with another rushing touchdown, putting up another score in a game that turned out to be another win for Colorado, closing this one out 17-0. And with this actually being the final game of the regular season, it turns out that Colorado is getting a chance to play in the Big 12 championship game. And if they win, it actually looks like they might secure a bye week for the college football playoff. This was already one of the biggest moments in program history for Colorado. So it surprised nobody that Deion was out there doing his best to motivate his team going into this next game.
Because it's not about them. This is about us. We ain't got tomorrow. We got now. We ain't got next. We got now. We ain't coming no more.
Early on in this one, Julian Lewis was not playing well, as he decided to scramble on this play and fumble the ball, turning it over to TCU. But in a season where Colorado had already played TCU, they were pretty familiar with their game, so Julian knew that they were pretty weak in the secondary and could easily fire passes downfield, as a receiver comes up with a huge catch and run for a touchdown that ultimately puts them up by 7 points. And that pretty much seemed to set the tone for Colorado, as they got the ball back with under a minute left in this half, and they still were able to drive their way downfield. Julian Lewis on this play was able to find a man open across the middle, and he easily worked his way around the defense for a touchdown, coming up with a score that extended Colorado's lead. But if that was not enough momentum already, turns out that Colorado wouldn't have to score any more points at all, as they continued to just chew clock in this game by moving the sticks. And after another first down here in the fourth quarter, it turns out that Julian Lewis would officially lead Colorado to becoming Big 12 champions, the first time for this program since 2001. And it was mostly thanks to their young quarterback who had another solid day in their biggest game. Now, as far as the season stats at this point, Julian Lewis was one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. He had over 3,000 yards with 30 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. The kid had absolutely balled out, and he actually had a chance to break Shedeur Sanders' record for the most passing touchdowns in a season. But now that it's time for the college football playoffs, this team did in fact get a bye week before heading into their first matchup, where it looks like they will definitely be playing the best team that they've seen all season, as now Colorado is set to match up against Penn State. Now, unfortunately, once again for Colorado, their offensive line was getting exposed. They continuously let Julian Lewis get jacked up in this game. It actually wouldn't be till the end of the third quarter where Colorado would finally come up with a touchdown, thanks to Julian Lewis, who just easily scrambled up the middle. But that was about as great as the offensive line would be throughout the game, besides the very end of it where they allowed Julian time to get this ball out to the right side of the field for a touchdown, putting up a score that technically kept the team alive in the final moments of this game. But unfortunately, Julian Lewis's first season as a starter was officially coming to a close, as they end up losing this game 21-16. And with this officially being the end of the Colorado season, many people are still proud of what their quarterback was able to produce. But in a season where Julian was getting beat up a lot, he had a lot to think about, considering that he had a lot of teams that wanted him to transfer. He could go somewhere where he was a lot more protected and was able to come up with some better plays. At the same time, he also felt like he can bring Colorado further than they have been this past season. So Julian Lewis definitely had some decisions to make, but I'll leave that decision up to you guys. If you want to see more Julian Lewis, be sure to get this video to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. Also, be sure to comment down below who else you guys want to see next, and YouTube thinks you'll like one of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you got to this point, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know, and other than that, I'm gonna catch you guys next time.
Can I? Before I turn the lights on.